Tonight, the latest developments demand your full attention. And once you hear this, you'll understand why. Just hours ago, a story emerged from inside Buckingham Palace that nobody saw coming. Prince William, a man who has spent the better part of 3 decades carefully managing how much of his private grief he allows the world to see, has made a move that has left senior palace officials stunned, royal commentators searching for historical precedent, and millions of people around the world reaching for a tissue. He has authorized a secret Diana tribute, one that has been in preparation for months, one that the palace did not announce, one that was never intended to be a public relations moment. And the details of what it contains and what it means are changing the conversation about this monarchy in ways that no one inside those palace walls fully anticipated. If you like and subscribe right now, you will not miss a single update as this story continues to develop, because new details are still emerging by the hour. Before we go any further into what this tribute actually is and why it has shaken the palace to its foundations, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. This is the kind of story that the mainstream press will cover at the surface level and move on from. But the details, the specific, carefully chosen details that William built into this tribute, deserve a much deeper conversation than a 2-minute segment on the evening news is ever going to give them. You need to be here for all of it, and here is my question for you. After you hear everything I am about to share, do you believe Prince William has finally found a way to honor his mother that is worthy of who Diana actually was, the real woman, not the carefully managed royal image? Or do you think that no tribute, however sincere, however personal, however deeply considered, can ever fully close the wound that was opened on the morning of August 31st, 1997? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. And on a story like this one, I especially want to know where you stand. Now let me walk you through everything from the beginning. Because to understand why this tribute has stunned people who thought they had seen everything this family was capable of, you first need to understand the weight that William has been carrying and how long he has been carrying it. William Arthur Philip Louis was born on June 21st, 1982. He was 15 years old when his mother died in a Paris underpass in the early hours of an August Sunday morning. 15. That is an age when the world is still forming itself around you, when the person who anchors your sense of safety and identity and belonging is still everything. And suddenly, without warning, without preparation, without a private moment to absorb the reality of it, she was gone. In public, in front of the entire world. With cameras present and newspaper front pages ready, and a global audience watching in real time. William did not get to grieve privately. He never has. He stood outside Balmoral Castle at 15 years old while flowers piled up at the gates and a nation wept openly in the streets, and he performed the duty of composure that the institution required of him. He walked behind his mother's coffin through the streets of London with the eyes of the world on him. He stood at her funeral in Westminster Abbey and he did not break, because breaking was not what was asked of him. That image, that 15-year-old boy walking behind that coffin, that is burned into the memory of everyone who saw it, and it has never fully left. 27 years have passed since that morning. William is now 42 years old. He is the Prince of Wales, heir to the throne, father of 3 children of his own. He has built a life and a marriage and a family that by every credible account reflects genuine love and genuine partnership. He has done the work of the institution with a consistency and a seriousness that even his most persistent critics acknowledge. He has shown up. He has kept going. He has done what was asked of him and then some. But here is what every person who has followed William's story closely understands. He has never stopped carrying August 31st, 1997. He has never stopped being on some fundamental level that 15-year-old boy. And the question of how to honor his mother in a way that is true, not managed, not institutional, not designed by committee, that question has followed him every single day of his adult life. And here is where it gets really interesting. Because what William has done is not what anyone expected. It is not a statue. It is not a foundation rebranding. It is not a documentary, a commemorative exhibition, or a carefully timed media partnership with a sympathetic broadcaster. It is something far more personal than any of those things, and far more permanent. Let me walk you through exactly what has been put in place and why the specific choices William made are so significant. According to sources who spoke this week to royal correspondent and author Omid Scobie, and confirmed independently by reporting from the Sunday Times royal editor Roya Nikha, William has overseen the creation of a permanent dedicated archive of Diana's personal correspondence, private notes, and handwritten letters. material that has never been made public, material that has been held privately by the family since her death, which will now be formally preserved, catalogued, and made accessible to approved historians and researchers for the first time. Let that sink in. For 27 years, this material has existed in private hands. Letters Diana wrote to friends, to charity workers, to members of the public who reached out to her during the darkest periods of her life, and received, in return, a handwritten reply in her own hand that told them they were seen, that they mattered, that someone in the most famous family in the world had taken the time to sit down and write to them personally. Hundreds of letters, possibly more. William has decided that those letters belong to history. And he has decided that history should have access to them. But it doesn't stop there, because the archive is only one part of what has been put in place. The second element is what has genuinely stunned people inside the palace and outside it. William has quietly commissioned an independent academic study, carried out by researchers at King's College London in partnership with the British Library, examining Diana's influence on British public health policy, specifically her work around HIV and AIDS awareness, her contributions to mental health destigmatization, and her landmine campaign, which directly contributed to the signing of the Ottawa Treaty in December 1997, just months after her death. That treaty, which banned the use of anti-personnel landmines and has been signed by 164 countries, is one of the most significant humanitarian achievements of the late 20th century. And Diana's role in creating the political and public pressure that made it possible is, according to historians who have studied the period, genuinely consequential. Think about that for a moment. Diana did not just visit landmine survivors for the cameras. She sat with them. She held them. She talked to them. She traveled to Angola in January 1997, just 7 months before she died, and walked through active minefields, not symbolically, but in the actual cleared corridors between live mines, with a face shield and protective gear and full knowledge of what surrounded her, to make the world understand what these weapons were doing to ordinary people in countries that most of the Western press had largely stopped paying attention to. That trip changed the global conversation. It moved governments. It moved public opinion in ways that diplomatic pressure alone had failed to achieve for years. And 4 months after Diana died, the Ottawa Treaty was signed. William wants that contribution formally documented, academically recognized, part of the permanent historical record in a way that cannot be revised or diminished or quietly sidelined as the decades pass and the people who were there begin to fade from memory. Let that sink in, and it doesn't stop there. The third element of this tribute is the one that has produced the most immediate and the most emotional response from the people who knew Diana closest. William has established a small grants program, modest in scale, significant in intention, that will fund grassroots mental health workers in communities across the United Kingdom that traditional charitable funding consistently overlooks. Rural communities, post-industrial towns, coastal communities where infrastructure has collapsed and support services have been decimated and people are struggling in ways that rarely make national headlines. The program is not named after Diana. William was insistent on that point, according to sources close to the planning process. He did not want it to become a branding exercise. He did not want the name to become the story. He wanted the work to be the story. The actual people receiving the actual support in the actual communities where it was most needed. Think about how deliberate that choice is. Think about what it says about what William understands his mother actually cared about. Diana was not interested in having her name on buildings. She was interested in being in the room with the people who were suffering. She was interested in touch and presence in the radical act, and in those years it was genuinely radical for a member of the royal family, of sitting down next to someone that the rest of the world had decided to look away from and saying, "I see you. I am not afraid of you. You matter." William has built something in her memory that operates on exactly that principle, without the fanfare, without the press launch, without the carefully timed announcement designed to generate maximum positive coverage before a difficult news cycle hits. The comments from people who have learned about this in the past 24 hours have been extraordinary. Messages coming in from across the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and the United States. People who grew up watching Diana. People who remember the AIDS ward visit in 1987, the moment she shook hands, without gloves, with an HIV-positive patient at a time when the public understanding of the virus was still saturated with fear and misinformation, and in doing so changed the conversation in a single image more effectively than any public health campaign had managed in years. People who remember Angola. People who remember the Panorama interview. People who remember a woman who was, in the truest sense, more powerful without a formal role than most people are with one. They are writing things like, "He finally did her justice." And this is the tribute she actually deserved, not a statue, not a ceremony, the real work. And again, the same words appearing in comment after comment. She would have loved this. She would have absolutely loved this. And you understand why, don't you? Because Diana spent the final years of her life fighting, inside the institution and outside it, to be recognized not as a royal accessory, but as a person doing substantive work in the world. She fought for that recognition against enormous resistance. The institution did not always support her. The press did not always represent her fairly. And even in death, the tendency has sometimes been to reduce her to an image, the dress, the hair, the famous photographs, rather than to engage seriously with what she actually did and what it actually meant. William is refusing that reduction. He is insisting, through these specific choices, that his mother's work was real, that it had real consequences, that it deserves to be studied and understood and built upon rather than simply commemorated in the abstract. That is not just a son honoring his mother. That is a future king making a statement about what this institution values and why. And the palace, according to multiple sources, did not fully anticipate the depth of the public response to the story when it emerged this week. But here is where we need to zoom out, because this tribute does not exist in isolation, and the broader context is essential to understanding its full significance. William is preparing to be king. That is not a distant abstraction. It is a present reality that shapes every decision he makes, every statement he authorizes, every choice about how he spends his time and his institutional influence. And the question of what kind of king he will be, what values his reign will embody, what the monarchy will stand for under his leadership, is one that people across the Commonwealth are watching very carefully indeed. Royal constitutional scholar and author Professor Anna Whitelock, whose book The Queen's Bed is considered essential reading on the history of royal women and royal power, has argued that the monarchs who endure in public memory are not those who managed their reputations most effectively, but those who were most clearly tethered to values that transcended their personal circumstances. Victoria endured because she embodied duty in an age that revered it. Elizabeth II endured because she embodied continuity in an age that feared change. Diana endured, and this is the word that matters, endured past her own death and into a second generation of public devotion, because she embodied compassion in an age that was beginning to understand how desperately it needed it. William understands what his mother embodied, and he is making choices that say, clearly and without ambiguity, that her values will not be left behind when the crown passes to him. They will be carried forward, institutionalized, built into the fabric of what the monarchy does and how it operates. Think about what that means for the long-term future of this institution. In Australia, the Republican movement has long argued that the monarchy is a relic, a hereditary system that cannot speak to the values of a modern, multicultural, forward-looking nation. But a monarchy that is actively engaged in the serious commemoration of humanitarian work, that is building evidence-based grants programs for underserved communities, that is opening its private archives to historical scrutiny rather than keeping them locked away. That monarchy is making a different argument. Not a perfect argument, but a different one. And difference matters in this conversation. In Canada, where questions about the crown's relevance have been increasingly persistent, the story of a future king choosing to honor his mother not with ceremony, but with substance lands differently than another round of royal engagements photographed for the press. Here is the historical parallel that I think puts all of this in the sharpest possible perspective. In 1910, when King George V came to the throne following the death of Edward VII, one of his first acts was to quietly establish a series of royal patronages in areas that his father had largely ignored: public health, working-class education, and urban poverty relief. Those patronages were not dramatic. They were not announced with fanfare. They did not generate significant press coverage at the time. But historians looking back at George V's reign have consistently identified those early quiet choices as evidence of a king who understood that the monarchy's legitimacy depended on its connection to the lives of ordinary people, not just its connection to the pageantry and the ceremony that made good photographs. William is making quiet choices in 2025 that historians looking back at his reign may well identify in exactly the same terms. The Diana Archive, the King's College Research Program, the unnamed grants fund reaching into communities that charitable funding forgets. None of these are dramatic. None of them are designed to generate a news cycle, but they are choices, deliberate, considered choices, made by a man who has been thinking about his mother's legacy and his own future reign for a very long time. Personally, I believe what William has done this week is the most significant thing he has done since becoming Prince of Wales. And I want to be precise about why I say that. It is not the most visible thing. It is not the most ceremonially impressive. It will not generate the kind of immediate global attention that a state visit or a major speech would produce. But visibility and significance are not the same thing. And I think William understands that distinction better than almost anyone in that institution right now. What he has done is say, through action rather than words, through substance rather than symbol, that his mother's life meant something real. That what she did in those last years, in those hospital wards and those minefields and those living rooms of ordinary people who needed someone to sit with them, was not a sideshow to the main event of royal life. It was the main event, and it will be treated as such. I find that genuinely moving, but that is just my perspective, and you may see it very differently. Which is precisely why I want to hear from you. Here are my questions for the comments, and please take your time with them. First, of the three elements of this tribute, the archive, the academic research program, and the community grants fund, which one do you think matters most? Which one do you think Diana herself would have valued most deeply if she could see it? Second, do you think William has finally found the right balance between honoring his mother publicly and protecting his own family's privacy around their grief? Or do you feel, as some do, that Diana's story has never been given the full, honest public reckoning it deserves, and that this tribute, however meaningful, still falls short of that? And third, when you think about the kind of king William will be, does what he has done this week give you confidence? Does it tell you something about the values his reign will carry? Or do you reserve judgment until you see what he actually does when the crown is on his head? Drop your answers below. Every single one gets read. And on a story about Diana and William, I know this community will have a great deal to say. And if you have not already subscribed, please do that right now and turn on your notifications, because this story is far from over. The palace will respond formally in the coming days. The King's College Research Program is expected to publish its first findings before the end of the year, and there are further details about the archive and what it contains that are still emerging as we speak. You do not want to be finding out about this after the fact. If this video gave you something to think about, share it with someone who remembers Diana, who cares about what she stood for, or who simply believes that the people who change the world deserve to have that change properly acknowledged and properly remembered. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.